Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voices of Music Therapy podcast. I'm your host, Brian Locascio, and today's guest is a white, queer, able-bodied cis woman. She earned her Bachelor's of Music Therapy at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina. She completed her clinical music therapy internship at Prisma Health Baptist Hospital in Columbia, South Carolina. She currently serves in the state of Minnesota working in memory care, hospice, and mental health. They have experience in providing music therapy in a variety of settings, including mental health, NICU, medical, special education, children and adolescent mental health as well. When she isn't working, she enjoys spending time with her dog, hiking, going to the gym, and performing her own original music live. Voices would like to welcome our fantastic guest, Cassidy Nooner. Hello, welcome.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yes, it's so nice to have you here, and I'm very excited for our listeners to get to hear about the topics that we're going to discuss today and all the insightful information that we are going to be sharing.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here.
So my very first question for you is, how do you define music therapy?
So my elevator speech, right? We all have an elevator speech. My elevator speech is music therapy is a researched and evidence-based use of music by a board-certified music therapist to reach non-musical goals. Those goals can range anywhere from increasing communication, coping skills, self-expression, decreasing restlessness, right? But I also have a stairs pitch, right? If I can convince somebody to take the stairs with me and be with me just a little bit longer, I say exactly what I just said, but I go into this mental picture of think of music therapy as a triangle. You've got point A as the client, point B as the music, and point C as the board-certified music therapist. And this triangle is a relationship. The relationship between the client and the music therapist, between the client and the music, and between the music therapist and the music. You need all points in order to have this music therapy thing. I couldn't do what I do, and what I do wouldn't be as effective without the music. The music couldn't serve its purpose, couldn't work its magic if it wasn't for the way I manipulate it. And of course, the music therapist and the music wouldn't be there if it weren't for the needs and the goals of the client. So we're all working together to build this beautiful relationship and make this nice, perfect little triangle.
That's awesome. I am so happy you shared that because I actually have a chart at my workplace that I hang up of that exact triangle.
Oh, I love that.
And I think painting that picture for people, that's such a great and approachable way to describe it. And also, I think we all need a stairs speech. I think that's such a beautiful idea because we talk about elevator speeches, but sometimes we do have more time.
Yeah, you do have a little more time. Or I always find myself craving more time. It's oh, this is my elevator pitch, and you can kind of understand these technical terms that I'm throwing at you, but I really want you to understand what I'm saying.
And that provides so much room for flexibility too, and in the way that you described it, because you're not saying this kind of music for this. You're describing the relationship and how that applies, and that's a really, really great way of approaching it.
I think that's the most important thing that we do, though, is we all have this relationship, like we do to our own therapists. We have this rapport and this relationship with them. Same with our clients. But we're so unique because I have a special relationship with music, and so do my clients.
Mm-hmm. And discovering what that is and how it applies and how you can build that relationship together.
Yes.
Cross music taste. No.
Exactly.
It's fantastic. What led you to music therapy based kind of on your insights? I'm curious.
Yeah. So I started playing guitar when I was 5 years old. And from then on, it took off. Any instrument I could get my hands on. Played trumpet in middle school, switched to French horn in high school, and that was my primary in college. But that's very common of a lot of music therapists. Music's just been a big part of our lives. In high school, we had to do a graduation project, and we started it our junior year. I thought I wanted to be a band director because I love music so much. I was I'm going to go music education. That's what I'm going to do. A neighbor of mine at the time was going to Appalachian State majoring in music therapy. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I looked into it. That's what I ended up doing my research topic and my project on. I found a music therapist that lived about an hour from me that was kind of my mentor and really just explained what this is, what it does. And at this same time, it's weird how the universe works, but at the same time, my great grandmother was on hospice and she was 95. So my family drove down to Florida, luckily a week before she passed. And I did what I always do. I always had some kind of instrument, even when I was young. It's not just a now thing, which is I have instruments in my car. It's just the way it is. But I had my ukulele, and my great grandma didn't know her name, didn't know anybody in the room, knew every single word and every single verse to each hymn I was singing, like she was back in the choir 40 years ago. And so it was just kind of, what is this power? I've got to be a part of this the rest of my life. And luckily I'm here living the dream now.
That's incredible. And what a special like thing to hold with you too, as like a first experience with music in that capacity almost.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really special. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
So then what led you from there? Were you like, oh, I really want to work in a certain population at that point? That once you were starting to learn what music therapy is and kind of have a moment where you had an experience that was very therapeutic musically?
In that moment, I didn't really know what population I wanted to work in. I was still a junior in high school. I was still very like, what is music therapy? But I've always enjoyed working with children and adolescents. I was a camp counselor for 6 summers. That's just...
Me too.
Yes. Big camp counselor vibes over here. So when I was going through college, I found that I loved child and adolescent mental health and behavioral health. And so that's definitely my preferred population. I think that's where I shine the most. But there's such beauty in each population. I love mental health, but you don't get that long-term relationship, especially like where I did my internship, it was crisis intervention. You see them for 7 days versus I'm working in memory care now. I've really got to develop a relationship with these older adults over the past 5 months, and I'm really enjoying that. So there's beautiful sides to all of it.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that a lot of people feel pressed into when they first enter the profession is kind of, which one am I going to be? What kind of music therapist? And I agree that like additional training is really, really important and people seek that out, whatever they do. But I do think the flexibility, like no matter what you choose, there will be something wonderful about that population, like you said. So something to keep in mind for those listeners who may be going through internship and still don't really know what population they want to work with, or going through school and they're like, these are all fine, but I'm not sure which one fits. Sometimes all of them are just really good and you just like them all. And sometimes there's one that like just really clicks, and that's a journey.
I would like to add on that, my least favorite practicum site in college was older adults. So
Wow.
you never know where a job's going to take you. They're 80% of my clientele right now is memory care, and I'm loving it. It was a little bit of an adjustment period, very different from adolescent mental health, but you just never know where you're going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And where you end up there, like you might not like it at first. And some people like that might not change. But for me, like I have found things that I really love about it. And so my whole perspective has changed.
Yeah. So for those listening, once again, I'm telling you, take the opportunity to really explore those relationships. And in school, you know, there's limitations in what you can do. There's structures. And so having that independence outside once you're in the professional workforce can be ultimately like changing for that view of the population. Thank you so much for sharing that. So as far as currently, you go through school, you get certified. What does it look like for you now? You touched on it a little bit, but how did COVID affect you within music therapy, and how are you doing now, and where do you want to go, and All the big questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I was 3 months into my internship when COVID struck.
Yeah.
And so the last 3 months of my internship was virtual, which was a very unique experience that a lot of people went through. I know I'm not the only one. So I ended up, after my internship and after passing my boards, I got offered this job up here in Minnesota, a good 18 hours away from North Carolina. And I moved just because finding a job was really hard at that time. I got really lucky to get offered this job. I've been enjoying it. Half of my groups are in person. The other half are virtual. I'm working in older adult memory care, a little bit of hospice, a little bit of mental health, both adults and children and adolescents. And I do have one adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities group.
Yeah, it sounds like you have quite a bit of variety within just that one setting too, which is something to keep in mind as well.
I do. I think I do really well with variety. As much as I would love to really focus on one thing, I also know that I get very excited to have multiple things going on. So it works really well for me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest draws to like memory care or like medical just in general, because it's an umbrella medical, but like there's so much diversity within that single umbrella that's what like attracted me to it as an undergrad and as a graduate. There's always like nuances. So I appreciate that you said that, because I think that's important for people here as well.
Absolutely. Possibilities are endless.
So now that you are working within memory care and have these different groups, it comes to our big question of the show, and that is, how are you innovative in the field of music therapy?
I was focusing during my internship real heavy on songwriting, and I still focus on that. But what I've been focusing a lot more recently is on my experience of being a queer music therapist for the non-queer generation. And what I mean by that, when I say non-queer generation, I hope everybody knows that's listening that I'm putting it in air quotes. Non-queer generation is quotated, because I know that there were LGBTQ plus people during that time period in our early years. I mean, we wouldn't be living the lives we have today if it weren't for those older pioneers and our past queer ancestors that really paved the way for us to live how we are living now. It is just in my experience that the folks that I'm working with are not queer. I have people that were born in the 20s in my group. I have a lady that's 101. My clientele is just a lot older. So when I just want to point that out when I say non-queer generation, that's what I'm meaning.
I think it's really helpful to define for people as well. Social media, just media in general, has really shed a light in recent years on queer culture and given more voices to those who weren't previously represented. Although it is still skewed, I will acknowledge that and say that, gay white men who are cis are definitely like the most represented in media, and we're definitely working to improve that. But certainly, yes, that generation, there was more safety concerns to be considered. There were a lot of social aspects that are still present today, but definitely as strong, if not more strong at the time. So thank you for defining that for everyone as well.
And I mean, I also know I'm not a history buff, right? That was never my subject that I was strongest in. And even as a queer individual, like Stonewall was 1969, if I remember correctly. And like gay marriage wasn't legalized till 2015. So we've got like all these numbers, but like you said, like this history that we're uncovering is very skewed. And there's also just so much that I don't know. So I'm not saying I am the smartest person in the world by any means. I just want to throw that out there. This is a lot of personal experience.
Absolutely. And if it's all right with you, I actually pulled some statistics that I'd like to share with our guests just regarding older adult care, especially within LGBT populations in general. One of the first statistics that I found is actually more than half, about 54% of LGBT elder care recipients receive care from their partner, as opposed to from a facility or something like that. And a quarter, around 24%, receive care from a friend. So talking about those within care facilities, I think LGBT individuals, at least the implication from this data is that they often seek individual support as opposed to larger facilities. Because I think that LGBT facilities in general are harder to find for older adults. I do know that they exist. There's actually a couple in San Diego. But yes, I think that's a really important percentage to keep aware for people listening. Another one is 21% of older LGBT adults have provided care to friends compared to only 6% of their heterosexual counterparts. So there's definitely like a sense of community in that taking care of fellow queers within their lives. And then for just the caregivers alone for LGBT individuals, they're more likely to be doing so in isolation as opposed to be part of a community to do that. So these are just really important things to keep in mind for why you may not notice as many LGBT adults or why they may not mention it within sessions, just for our listeners. I know that you're very well aware of this, but these are just things to keep in mind.
I'm so glad you brought in those statistics. Oh, that's awesome.
Of course, I'm always glad to share it. So would you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about your experience working with this population and how you kind of talk about queerness or how it's even present within sessions and how you balance identities?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The first thing I'll touch on is self-disclosure. I have not openly shared with my memory care patients that I am queer. That is just something that I have not found that will be beneficial to the therapeutic relationship between me and my clients. And I think that's a big part of self-disclosure as a therapist. I think you should only self-disclose when it's beneficial to the therapeutic process. And that for me has not felt like it will be beneficial because it is memory care and you never know what someone's going to remember, right? And they might not remember what you tell them, but they'll remember how it made them feel. And it's not so much about me feeling the need to be safe in that space. I want them to feel safe in my space. And not that my queerness will make them unsafe, but I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. We've built so much rapport over the last 6 months. At this point, I don't feel like it has beneficial qualities for our therapeutic relationship.
What are some things that you may look for as signs of it being a beneficial part of a relationship? I know you said those haven't been present, but what would the things that you do look for be?
Absolutely. I look for a lot of signs of just how open-minded does somebody seem? You know, when they talk about their grandkids or their children and their grandkids and children's partners, how are they referring to that? When they talk about staff members, because that does come up often. And it's also very cliche things of like, oh, that person's hair is blue, and how do they feel about that? And I know not all queer people dye their hair blue, and not all people that dye their hair blue are queer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that is something that I'm looking for. And it's also, how are they talking about themselves? Are they being very negative self-talk? Because that's definitely something, if you're feeling bad about yourself, we all have things we feel bad about ourselves about. And that's something that we can work through and kind of diving into that and seeing where that leads. So those are a few signs that I would look for.
Very helpful. And as far as the individuals, have you ever had an individual disclose that information? It sounds like not so far.
Not so far. Not yet. Fingers crossed. I know it might happen soon. We're always hopeful over here, but no, not yet.
It'll happen. It'll lead in, and I'm excited to hear more about that. So thank you for sharing, especially about signs that you look for as far as creating a safe space and within that therapeutic relationship. Within the music that you choose for, you mentioned that you like to do a lot of songwriting.
I do.
And I was just going to ask you to talk a little bit about how that songwriting plays its role and things that you focus on within those older adult memory care groups. How does it function?
My songwriting with older adults is a lot of rewriting songs, even to be really silly. because a lot of it is improving quality of life, improving mood, and just riding a silly blue suede shoes, but talking about your favorite foods, like don't eat my chocolate cake. Karen, no, and just something to get you laughing, right? Like it's supposed to be a good time. Like not all our songs have to be so serious. And we have written, this is memory care, right? A lot of the times they will have little baby dolls because that's very beneficial to them to be holding that baby doll. And so we've written lullabies from thin air. Like I'll just get them talking and write things on a whiteboard. And we get going, and then we've got our own little lullaby to sing to these little kids or these little baby dolls. But it is a lot of fill in the blank. Some of it is very, very serious. And what a wonderful world. Like what are some of the best things that's happened in your life? Who are some of your favorite people? But a lot of it is very silly of like, we're going to sing on top of spaghetti, but like about our favorite item of clothing. And it's just so weird. Or we're going to write a song. I did this recently about ruining Thanksgiving dinner. Like we burnt the turkey, like, oh no, and just having a good time.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. I love that you have like the playfulness to it, similar to like kind of keeping that energy up and light. You don't hear a lot about that from people who are like new in the field of older adult care and memory care. So I think that's really important to mention.
Thank you. I think a lot of that stems from my love of working with kids. I do have this childish energy about me, but I also feel like that's why the older adults really enjoy me being there, is because, oh yeah, we can take it in a very somber direction. We can process grief if that's what we need to do today, because sometimes that comes up. But other times, like they're just kicking their feet and smiling. It's like, all right, like let's do some movements. Let's sing a silly song.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting an opportunity to just move your bodies and just have a wacky time together.
A wacky time. That is a great way to say it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, kind of talking about these beautiful relationships that it sounds like you are creating with your clients, whether in group settings or individuals. And then in addition, this idea of this queer identity in the non-queer generation, I was wondering ways that you, within the relationship of therapist, music, and then as well as client, what are ways that you have to adapt as far as identity, or what are some things with your identity that may influence that relationship?
One is a big way that I feel comfortable dressing. I think I present very androgynous, and sometimes even more masculine. I wear a lot of button downs and collared shirts, and because that's how I feel comfortable. And oftentimes, sometimes it's daily, but it's always weekly. I get asked, are you a boy or a girl? And I always answer that question the same. I say, I'm a music therapist. We're going to have our music therapy group. We're going to do some singing, maybe even play some drums. Would you like to join? Because this person asking is in our group. And sometimes that's a great redirection where I just avoided that question as a whole. And sometimes they're very stuck on it and very like, yeah, but are you a boy or a girl? I haven't had to answer this question yet because somebody else in the group will always chime in and say, oh, obviously that's a girl, or oh, obviously that's a boy. And I just roll with it because that's just who I am. I personally don't feel the need to say, yes, I am this, because is it super beneficial to the therapeutic relationship? In my eyes, no. So I just kind of roll with whatever happens. That's also just who I am as a person. Whatever happens, happens. You can call me whatever you want. Just don't call me anything rude.
Yeah.
But that is always my answer. I got asked that question a lot when I worked with children. Are you a boy or a girl? And in that instance,
children hold no punches.
Exactly.
They will always ask whatever they're thinking.
And honestly, memory care too. The similarities are so wild. When I was working with children and I got asked that, I would use that as an opportunity to educate and say, some people identify this way, some people identify that way. And it's absolutely okay to ask somebody their pronouns. And this is how you can do that. And just, educating in that moment because it's so important. But if I were to tell that to my memory care patients, I don't think it would be very beneficial. I'd get a lot of weird looks, which I'm absolutely okay with weird looks. But it just wouldn't be very helpful. So I just say, I'm a music therapist. Let's go to group. I've got some egg shakers. Do you want one?
What a great way to redirect and like display how to redirect for people who may not have had experiences yet, where people ask them dead on. And speaking of this, with all these different ways that individual clients may ask, especially for our newer queer music therapists out there, but they may ask, are you a boy or a girl? Are you gay or you're straight? Are you pansexual? Whatever it is, any type of queer identity that they may present. What are some additional ways that you think would be beneficial to redirect clients if it's not going to be beneficial to the therapeutic relationship?
Yeah, I've actually got a nice little list. I've got 3 little bullet points we can get at to making a queer safe space.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Let's go ahead and hold everyone off on that and go to our commercial break, just so that you all can stay interested and be thinking about ways that you might navigate those conversations individually as the listeners. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I have the absolute pleasure of sitting down and talking about queer music therapists for the non-queer generation with Cassidy Nooner, and we are just about to dive into the different bullet points and 3 things that she does to create a space that is queer and safe, and just a wonderful opportunity to have that beneficial therapeutic relationship. So, Cassidy, whenever you're ready, feel free to talk on those points.
So the first thing I do to make my space a queer safe space is I ask the staff members, the nurses, the facility staff, their pronouns. Anybody that I know I'll be working with regularly, I just ask them, hey, what are your pronouns? Also, what's your name? Because I go around to different facilities and a lot of times I see, different staff people every time I go to the same facility. And so just asking pronouns, making that a very regular conversation, a very normal thing to ask, because it is. But 50% of the people are like, what are you asking me right now? And so giving that opportunity to educate, I think, is very important. The second thing I do to make my space a queer safe space is I try to refrain from using any gendered terms. So I use as many gender neutral terms as I can. So when I address the group, I don't say, hey guys. I hear that a lot on TikTok and YouTube. Hey guys. It's like not every listener is a guy. So I say a lot of what I personally say is hello, my friends, because I feel like we've gotten to that point in our therapeutic relationship where we are a little bit of friends. Like, hello, my friends. How are y'all? That's another one. Hey, y'all. Hey, folks. Whether it's with an X or a K, however you like to spell it. So very gender neutral when I address the group. Another thing, I don't ever assume that anybody was married. I work with a lot of 70, 80, 90-year-olds, but I don't assume that they were ever married. People don't get married for lots of reasons, but if they were queer, they legally couldn't, or it wasn't safe to be in a partnership with the same sex. So I always ask if that's related to what we're talking about, if that's related to the song discussion or the songwriting. Were you married is the first one. And then tell me about your spouse or your partner. I don't ask, little Sally, tell me about your husband, because maybe Sally didn't have a husband. So just keeping that out there. And sometimes I get a lot of strange looks of my partner, but it's like, yeah, your spouse, who you were married to. Keeping that very open.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the third thing is just, I think a lot of therapists try and do this, but being your authentic self when you show up to your groups is just being who you are. And I know we touched on it at the beginning of the episode about how I haven't self-disclosed to my clients that I am queer because of the relationship. But I am queer and I show up that way no matter where I am. And I think that's very important. We all want a space where we feel like we can be ourselves. And that space starts with the space we create. So I show up just as I am in hopes that people will show up just as they are.
Within that musical presence that you provide for the clients, do you ever have any queer nuances that you bring musically? I know that's a weird thing to say. I can dive into that a little bit more, but I was just wondering.
Dive into that a little bit more. I'm a little curious what you have to say.
Yeah, so I will give an example. This isn't like directly queer, but it definitely has its nuances. So, for instance, a lot of times when I'm singing with clients, and also this is a little bit about a musical characteristics for me personally, but I was trained as a countertenor. And so a lot of times I will take like the traditional female octave because that's where my voice feels really, really comfortable. And people are always like, I talk really low, or I talk at like a medium level, but I sing really, really high. And so when you're singing like traditionally female led songs like that, people are like, you know what I mean? So people start to develop this concept of, usually when I hear a guy sing, I hear this octave and they're singing like this. And there's something going on there, but it could just be that they like to sing high. It's not quite like I'm queer, but it definitely has the nuances of I'm doing things in an untraditional route. So I didn't know if you do anything like that or prefer like, I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Absolutely. No, I definitely have a lower voice. I feel like for a female body person, I sing low. I do sing a lot of male songs. A lot of Hank Williams, because a lot of
yes,
that is the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I do sing in a very like George Strait, I can sing down here and it be a-okay. I Patsy Cline like nobody's business, right?
Yes.
So that's my range. And when I try and do like some Doris Day, some stuff that's probably a little bit higher for me, I have to change the keys to make it in, which is the power we have, to make it in a more comfortable range for me. And I don't think I've ever thought of that as queer, but like traditionally, like I am a female bodied person. Like I should, quote unquote, sing high, and I don't, and I just can't.
Yeah. And that has a lot of cultural things that I don't want to dive into too much, but yeah, that expectation of like traditionally like masculine people just in general having lower voices and feminine people having higher voices, and how that's just not how voices work. So thank you. Yeah. I just thought I'd mention that because that's something that I don't know if I realized until we've been talking here. I was like, that's not like a queer like itself thing, but it could be influence in that we may feel comfortable trying out different styles like that or performing those songs. And for our listeners as well, thank you so much for sharing those points. I think that's super helpful. So also to reiterate, asking names and pronouns, refraining from gendered language, try and refrain from saying like, hey guys, or other really popular terms like that, but in switching out with y'all or folks or friends. And then don't assume that people have like a partner or spouse, as well as your last point that you made there, which was
being your authentic self, just showing up as you are in hopes that other people will show up as they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of being your authentic selves, I'm thinking about the clients too. The ones that we work with every single day and thinking about their authentic selves. And I just want to draw attention to a couple things. One of the first things that I wanted to mention was we were talking a little bit about identities and safety and comfortability and the social view prior to basically the 2000s. That's when things like really, really ramped up as far as acceptance and tolerance and things like that. But for a lot of individuals who may be older adults, they may never have had the opportunity to feel comfortable exploring in that way, especially like sexually or gender wise. I'm thinking about like the bisexual eraser, and that a lot of individuals probably might have had these attractions, but they thought they were normal and just didn't pursue them. Or I'm thinking about like gender as well. And like traditionally gender and sex are associated as the same thing within religious Western culture. But then that being said, like I do want everyone to keep in mind and have an open mind to this, but also the concept of, there's not even two biological sexes. There's people who are intersex who are born with different aspects of both genitalia. And so even on a sex basis, there's not just a binary. And then keeping in mind that gender isn't associated with. It's not the same as sex. Gender can be individual identity and how you want to be perceived by the world and those expectations that are associated with that. And so just because I might have one type of genitalia doesn't mean that I really want to go to work every day and chop wood and play sports and not want to express my emotions in a very healthy way. Just keeping that in mind for everyone. And that is just to kind of shift and reiterate what you were saying this whole time, and that everybody has their individual identities, whether clients or the therapists that come into the process, and to keep an open mind to what those are and how they influence that process. That's the soapbox for today, everybody. Sorry.
That's a soapbox I can get behind, so we're good.
Yeah. For our listeners, why don't you tell us what your plans are moving forward and anything that you would like to promote or any ways that they can contact you if they have any additional questions?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Cassidy_Nooner with an N as in Nancy. So if you need to reach out at all, that's a great way to find me. I am private, so just send me a little request and we're good to go. Some things that I'm working on is actually coming up with an EP album that I will hopefully be releasing on some platforms here soon. I am a singer-songwriter outside of being a music therapist, and maybe that is why I am so heavy on songwriting as an intervention, because that's a big part of who I am and how I process the world. I have some stuff on SoundCloud, Brian, that I can give you the link to, and you can share that with the world. If you want to give my SoundCloud a listen, there's some stuff on there with various bands that I was in college and songs that I've written, as well as my YouTube channel. You can subscribe there, and I've got some fun little original songs there as well. I am taking a route that is an EP for music therapists, so songs that are good for our souls as a music-loving sharer. So be on your toes for that. That is in the beginning works, so it might not be out for a while. Be patient, but I am excited to start working on that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for creating and working on that resource. I'll make sure to help promote that when it comes out so that our listeners see. In addition, everyone, all of these links are going to be in the episode description. If you just click on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Don't forget to check out our episode playlist that we create too. Cassidy and I will be working together to create some great songs that perhaps you can use with older adults or just great songs to listen to. So we will be sharing that with you. Don't forget to rate our podcast on Apple Music, and feel free to click that little subscribe button so that you get alerts for when new episodes are released. Typically, we like to release it on Fridays every other week. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Voices of Music Therapy. I love your all's comments, so feel free to keep commenting and participating in our polls and things like that. We additionally have free resources that you can use, such as interventions or just conceptual frameworks as far as music therapy goes. And if you haven't heard of the Music Therapy Podcast Collective, I absolutely encourage you all to check that out. You're already listening to a podcast, so why not get CMTE credits for it as well? And there are a lot of great deals for that. So feel free. You can listen to 3 episodes like you do now. There's a variety of music therapy podcasts on all these different topics, and you can find one that really fits you well and is on your timeline. And I believe you can get up to 5 or 6 CMTEs for those too. So it's very, very cool. I would like to thank Cassidy so much for coming on to the show. It's been a pleasure getting to talk with you and getting to know you. And I think that this is going to be a really helpful episode to our listeners, whether students or professionals who have been in the field for decades, on just older adults and this quote unquote non-queer generation.
Thank you for having me, Brian. Thank you for creating a space where music therapists can come and talk and learn together. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all, and feel free to tune in to the next episode of Voices of Music Therapy. If you'd like to see today's guest or learn more about the show, check us out on Facebook or Instagram at Voices of Music Therapy, or on Twitter at VOMT Podcast. If you have any questions or if you know any innovative music therapists and would like to recommend them for the show, you can email us at voicesofmusictherapy@gmail.com.